Here's a topic from a recent episode of the Powercat Podcast.
All right, last question of the podcast from Beef Pack.
What?
Beef Pack.
I love it.
For Fitz, what were your thoughts on your visit with Travis Goff?
Very nice guy. The whole crew over there was wonderful. I've known Colin Sexton for quite a while. Families know each other, but I think people misunderstand interviews. You thought I was going to go in and yell at him or something. I wanted to have a discussion. My goal with this was to get him on the record saying what needed to be said. And we did, and we'll see where that leads. I don't know if it will do anything. I don't think he was completely forthcoming on some of the stuff. I wish I'd pushed him more on the estimate part, but I don't know construction, and I got back and everyone said, you bet your contractor can break that out. They're used to that. So if you eliminate this piece of the project, how much do you eliminate? I think a lot of the stuff where I missed on that, a lot of the stuff that would probably be assigned to the convention center would actually be necessary for the football stadium. If you didn't have the convention center, you'd still have a lot of the stuff. And that's probably where I came up short. And I don't see how they're going to make it. And his answer was, well, we got to make it. Well, that's not how it works. I mean, if you get bad weather and you fall behind, this is a huge gamble. I sincerely hope they get it done for that season, because that would be greatly disappointed. But we drove by, Zach, and it looks goofy with that student section still there. It just does.
Yeah, the other side.
They've got to get that done as soon as they can.
They've got to tear down the east side. They can't leave that up and renovate it. There's no way.
Yeah, see, I didn't even consider this. The whole bird cage thing, or whatever you want to call it, the lighting, which is pretty cool looking. It won't be there for that. They'll go 3/4 of the way or 2/3 of the way around, and then they'll just have their traditional lights that they have. What's this fly trying to get on the podcast? The traditional lights that they've had over that section. It's going to look really awkward. So I hope they get that fixed pretty soon. I hope they come up with that money, but I don't know.
I mean, good for them for building a football stadium, because
here's another thing though. Sorry, Zach.
Yeah.
I didn't quite grasp or even consider this. This stadium had a track around it for its entire history up until recently. And that space was just covered up with turf.
Mm-hmm.
They're moving the stands in. The end zone where the convention center is, the bowl, and is moving in significantly, because if you look at old pictures, there was a lot of empty space there. And as Travis Goff said, they awkwardly had built different things to fill space.
Kind of the touchdown club or whatever it was.
And now those seats will be much closer to the game with a much better viewing angle. And it creates a lot more space between stadium's edge and the street.
Just a better use of space, period.
Right.
Yeah. But, good for them for building a stadium and getting the ball rolling here, because we don't like working in bad stadiums.
No,
it was probably the least. This is probably the worst stadium that we go to regularly and cover football games.
I didn't think about this. Is the visiting locker room going to stay the same?
Ooh,
because that's a big piece they need to fix.
Yeah, I think that there's certain things that should be required of
Big 12 institutions.
And that includes having a proper visiting locker room and a proper visiting media room.
Exactly.
I mean, nothing will top how bad Missouri was last year.
God.
Nothing will top that. But KU is easily the worst media room in the Big 12.
Well, we pretty much abandoned it now and just do it outside.
And you basically have to. TCU's is only bad because it's in the loading dock. At least it's separate from everything, but it's not a true room that's closed off. But for the most part, KU is easily the worst setup. It is not fun.
I'm really curious when they get this in practice, if the convention center will really be a convention center having lots of events, because that's what's being sold here, or if it's going to be like the Shamrock Zone. Yeah, you can have your wedding reception there, but it's a game day facility. So I think their intention is to use it much more for conventions. But of course, we were sold concerts with Bramlage Coliseum. We'll get lots of concerts, and that hasn't panned out that way. And
but also, what possible? I get that the convention center is going to be decently sized, but it's still a football stadium. It's still attached to a football stadium. It's not like a Kansas City convention center or a large metro convention center. I mean, look at Manhattan's convention center. I would argue that there isn't enough space to make something that big in that space that they're at. So I'm curious what kind of conventions they're going to be going after, especially when you compare it to the types of things that Manhattan would get.
Well, and also parking is going to be a major issue for that convention center. Yeah. There's nothing really adjacent to it if you're hauling in a bunch of stuff for your convention. I think it'll be really interesting, and I hope they get going with the actual gateway and that side of it. But it's my understanding also they're having a hell of a time finding a hotel company that wants to be located right there. And I think that's interesting. I didn't know that. It's funny, after you come back from one of these things, people send you, well, you should have asked about that. And I want to respond, you should have told me about that. I didn't know until you just told me. It's very frustrating. Why didn't you ask about this? Well, I didn't have any idea. You really needed to share it.